welcome to Narayana IAS Academy. This is Sureka Buster presenting to you the Daily News Analysis. For today's discussion, we've picked up a number of articles from The Hindu and the Indian Express which are both important and relevant for the UPSC CSE examination. So let us have a look at the topics one by one. The first article for the day has been taken from page number 6 of The Hindu, a three-dimensional view of the Israel-Iran crisis. So this particular article talks about the ongoing crisis between Iran and Israel, as well as the recent direct attacks that have been launched by Iran on Israel via the missiles as well as drones. And here it is very important that we'll be discussing about the change or the shift in Tehran's approach towards its long-standing shadow war with that of Israel, and also, let us actually analyze what are the different factors that are responsible for the growing inclination of Iran towards Russia as well as China, the reluctance of US to actually involved in this particular crisis or conflict, and also we'll be discussing about what are the struggles that Israel actually faces against the Hamas. The second article for the day has been taken from page number 9 of the Indian Express, Healing the Soil. So this particular article talks about the detrimental effects or the impacts that the current agricultural practices and policies have on that of the environment, specifically with respect to that of the health of the soil, the groundwater depletion, the biodiversity loss, as well as the greenhouse gas emissions. So this particular article focuses on the emphasis or the need to reform these particular policies in order to make the food systems both sustainable as well as climate resilient. The third article for the day has been taken from page number 1 of The Hindu, that is the NHRC accreditation status faces a review this week in Geneva. So this particular article discusses about the National Human Rights Commission of India defending its human rights processes at a UN meeting in Geneva, where its A status will actually be reviewed and the concerns have actually been raised on the composition as well as the functioning by the Global Alliance of the National Human Rights Institutions. So here we'll be looking at what is this Global Alliance Institution on National Human Rights, as well as we'll be looking at the credibility or the significance of its accreditation process. The next article for the day has been taken from page number 6 of The Hindu, Towards Green Growth. So here the article actually suggests that the Reserve Bank of India should actually draw inspiration from the Central Bank of the European Union in order to develop a green taxonomy framework in order to assess the sustainability credentials of the economic activities. So here we'll actually dwell into the concept of this particular green taxonomy framework. The last article for the day has been taken from page number 11 of the Indian Express, Village Defence Guard killed over shootout with militants in Udhampur's district of JMK. So this article talks about a village defence guard who had been very unfortunately killed in confrontation with that of the militants in the Udhampur district of Jammu and Kashmir. So here, with respect to that of UPSC relevance, we'll be discussing about what are the village defence guards are, as well as village defence committee, what do these actually entail. And we will conclude this session by discussing few prelims as well as mains practice questions. The first article for the day, a three-dimensional view of Israel-Iran crisis. So this particular article discusses about the ongoing conflict between Israel as well as Iran and Iran's recent missile and drone attack on Israel, marking a significant shift in Tehran's approach towards a long-standing shadow war that it has actually been having with that of Israel. Also, we'll be discussing various factors that are responsible for the increased inclination of Iran with the nations like Russia as well as China. Also, the possibility or what are the reasons for the reluctance of US to actually involve directly into this matter by providing military support. And we'll be discussing what are Israel's struggles against that of the Hamas. So in this particular article, we shall actually discuss about Iran-Israel conflict as well as the geopolitics actually surrounding in the West Asian region. And India and its next extended neighbor is actually very, very important over here, as West Asia is India's extended neighbor. Okay. So apart from India's immediate neighbor, UPSC also asks questions on the extended neighbors, or what is the impact of any kind of changes in the politics and policies developed over there. What kind of impact it has on that of India is very important. So this particular topic can be mapped to the GS paper 2 under your mains examination under effect of policies and politics of developed and developing countries on India's interests. So moving forward, there have been questions in the previous year, especially with respect to that of, India's stand on any kind of issue that is actually, happening either in West Asia, Central Asia, etc. And there was a question in 2018 on US-Iran nuclear pact. So you understand the relevance of this particular discussion. And also India's relation with Israel had actually been discussed over here. So now moving on, let us actually understand what this particular article is focusing on. Okay. So here, the article actually discusses Iran's recent missile and drone attacks on Israel, marking a strategic shift in Tehran's approach towards its long-standing shadow war that it had been having with that of Israel. Now, it also analyzes the factors that are influencing Iran's decision, including its improved ties with the countries of Russia as well as China, and perceived US reluctance for the conflict, that is, the reluctance that US is actually showing in involving directly with respect to that of the war by providing, direct support to that of Israel, and Israel's struggles against the Hamas of late. So here, if you see more on the news, if you see this particular image, you can actually see the location of Iran, Iraq, etc. And now what happens is Iran has actually, attacked Israel directly through, drones as well as the missiles. So here, a map question can come asking about the Red Sea, the Caspian Sea, the Black Sea, and the Persian Gulf and all the regions in West Asia is very, very important. Now let us understand, some extended or the backgrounder of this particular news. So, the Iran-Israel conflict has actually escalated recently, with Iran actually launching a direct attack on the Israel for the first time. This particular attack was carried out by Iran's paramilitary force, that is actually called as the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, as a retaliation or response for the Israeli war jets that actually targeted an Iranian consulate that was actually located in Syria near this month. And now, Iran actually terms this particular attack by means of drone and missile on Israel as Operation True Promise. So now it is very, very important for us to understand the historical overview of how the relations between Iran and Israel has actually been, because any topic with respect to that of international relations actually, requires you to go back and do the reverse engineering and understand its history as to how the conflict has actually evolved over the years. So now, the Iran-Israel conflict has actually, it has actually escalated. Here, it had its root in the year 1948 after the Arab-Israeli War. So, what is this Arab-Israeli War? This was also called as the First Arab-Israeli War or the Israeli War of Independence, or it is called as a Nakba, that is the catastrophe by the Palestinians. Okay, so this was the first in the series of conflict that actually took place between Israel as well as the Arab neighbors. Okay, so Israel actually has the Jewish population and the Arabs were the Palestinians. So this is what is important. And why did actually the war start? It started immediately after the United Nations General Assembly voted for the partition of Palestine into two states, recognizing Palestine as a separate state and Israel as a separate state. So this was called as a two-state policy. So here what happened, the Jewish leaders, that is the people of Israel, actually had accepted it, whereas Palestinian or the Arab leaders rejected it. As a result, what happened? There was a full-scale war that actually was fought between Israel as well as the surrounding Arab states. Now let us understand how was the ties or the relation between both the sides pre-1979, okay, that is before the Iranian Revolution. So before the 1979 revolution, Iran was one of the first countries which actually recognized Israel, actually following its formation or its declaring independence in the year 1948. So Iran, was the first country to recognize Israel as a separate country. And during the Pahlavian dynasty rule, that is, which was actually ruling Iran. So during the Pahlavi dynasty rule that was ruling Iran, Iran had maintained very cordial relationship with that of Israel. And it was selling oil to the Jewish state amidst the economic boycott by the Arab states, okay. Now moving on, after the 1979, after 1979, what had happened is the new Iranian regime was under Ayatollah Khomeini, okay. So this actually immediately had severed or strained the ties that actually Iran and Israel were sharing, as they actually, started viewing Israel as occupants of, or people who actually exploited the Palestinian land, okay? And also, Iran was believed to have started promoting or, giving extended military support as well as political support to the Palestinian groups like the Hamas, like the Hezbollah, etc., which were engaged in armed struggle against the Israel, okay? And also in 1980s, during the Iran-Iraq war, Israel provided intelligence and also some of the military assistance to that of Iraq, okay, so that it can actually fight against Iran. So this is all called as a proxy or the shadow warfare, where they are not directly involved. Now, moving on, there was nuclear program as well as the covert operations. That is, Iran's nuclear program actually started developing in the 1990s and the 2000s, okay. So here, Israel became increasingly concerned over the development or the potential development of nuclear power in the West Asian region. And also, Israel is believed to have carried out a series of operations like the cyber attacks and the assassination of various Iranian nuclear scientists and airstrikes to sabotage this particular program. And also in 2010, we have the Stuxnet computer worm that widely attributed to joint US-Israel efforts that caused significant damage to the Iran's uranium enrichment centrifuges, okay? And now moving on, there was proxy conflict. So what do you mean by proxy conflict is that the Iran-Israel conflict has been characterized by, proxy conflict, where nothing but with both the countries supporting various other militant groups without directly involving in the issue. Various militant groups were actually supported, and also, like for example, I told you, Iran support to Hezbollah in Lebanon, and we have Hamas in the Gaza Strip. These have been significant factors in the recent concerns of the increasing conflict. Now, if you see the recent escalation, regarding the recent escalation, what happened was around October 2023, the Hamas, that is the Iran-backed terrorist group, they actually launched a missile attack targeting Israel. So, the Hamas versus Israel actually started in 2023, and Israel actually started their airstrikes in Gaza. So after that, what happened? The Iranian-backed proxy, that is Hezbollah, in Lebanon again started attacking northern Israel, and this actually escalated further in 2024, where the Iranian consulate, which was actually the building in Damascus, that is Syria, was struck by Israeli airstrikes. And this actually caused a lot of humanitarian crisis, and also killed a senior commander of the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps, that is also called as the IRGC. And further, on 13th April 2024, in retaliation to the attack of Israel in Damascus, Iran actually launched drone as well as the missile attack on Israel. And this particular drone attack was called as the Operation True Promise. And this actually had the code name called as Ya Rasul Allah. So this is actually the historical overview of how it actually started after the Arab-Israeli war, and how it, the cardial were the relationships between the pre-Islamic revolution and post the Iranian revolution, what was actually, the severed or the, crisis or the conflict that was actually taking place between Iran and Israel, because they actually viewed Israel as the occupants of the Palestinian land. And after that, the nuclear program of Iran also had, was a threat towards Israel, and they actually considered that they will actually have a dominance in this West Asian region. After that, there was proxy conflict where, they were, either sides were not directly involved, but they were actually involved in supporting variant militias or the militant groups. And finally, we saw what are the recent escalations that actually took place. So now, let us actually look at Tehran's strategic calculus. That is, Tehran is the capital of Iran. So let us see what is Iran's strategic calculus and how it is going to exploit the regional shifts. The first one is the change in Iran's strategy towards Israel is very clear, marked by a move from the covert action to open military engagement. Earlier, it was actually a shadow war that was going on, but now it is very open. It is a military attack by using drones as well as missiles, and this shift is informed by several strategic calculations. So why is this actually happening? The first strategic calculation is the partnership. Here, Iran's enhanced military cooperation with that of Russia. So, Iran is actually said to have supplied Russia with that of the arms during the conflict Russia had with that of the Ukraine. And also, Iran actually felt that there was non-intervention of the United States in this matter. So, this actually gained international confidence. That is, Iran got its international confidence and mitigated the risk of any kind of regional isolation. The second one is US priorities, okay? So, Iran has observed America's shifting focus. That is, the US was actually totally focused on Eastern Europe as well as the Indo-Pacific region. So, this actually, here what happened, Iran perceived that this is an indication that, it is an indication that the US may not be inclined to engage deeply in the new conflicts in West Asia, particularly reducing repercussions for Iran's assertive actions. Moving forward, next one is Israel's Gaza quagmire. So here, Iran may view Israel's extended conflict with Hamas. That is, Israel has had an extensive, continued conflict with that of Hamas, but still it actually was not successful. So this was an advantage for Iran, where it viewed Israel conflict with Hamas, which had struggled to achieve its strategic goals and drawn international disapproval as a diminishment of Israel's deterrence. So it actually rendered Israel to be weak over here in front of Iran's eyes, and this perception could encourage Iran to apply more aggressive military pressure on this particular, nation. Next one, doubts over US commitments. The perceptions of decreasing reliability on the US. So Israel is completely dependent on the US for supplying of arms, etc. But here, there is a reluctance of US to actually involve in this matter. First thing is, it actually does not want to make its hands very dirty. The second one is, it is actually focused on the Indo-Pacific region, which it conceives to be, more geopolitically strategic for it, okay? So here, perceptions of the decreasing reliability in the US security commitments in this particular region may lead to Iran in believing the fact that it can expand its regional dominance and escalate the military initiatives without facing any kind of direct US military intervention. The next article that we'll be discussing about is healing the soil. So this particular article discusses about the detrimental impacts that the agriculture or the current agricultural practices or the policies are actually having on the environment, especially with respect to that of the health of the soil, the depletion of water, biodiversity loss, as well as the GHG or the greenhouse gas emissions. And also, it calls for reforms of these particular agricultural policies or the practices that actually cause detrimental impacts on these factors in order to make the food systems both sustainable as well as climate resilient. So here, we will be discussing about what is climate resilient agriculture, as well as few of the concepts of environmental degradation, how it actually happens, and what is the, way forward for sustainable agriculture, okay? And also, this particular topic can be mapped to GS paper 3 for your mains examination under agriculture, environmental pollution and degradation. So moving forward, agriculture has been a very, very important topic for your examination, whether be its inclination towards economy or towards environment. It is very, very important. So we've had questions in the year 2014 as well as 2017 on, the Green Revolution. And also in 2017, there was a question on various types of revolution, okay, that actually took place in agriculture after independence in India. So here, agriculture as a topic is very, very important for the examination, specifically the mains examination. And the schemes associated with it will be important for your prelims examination. Now let us understand what this particular article is talking about. The article discusses about the detrimental impact of the current agriculture policies and practices on the environment, and it also emphasizes on the urgent need to reform these particular policies in order to make the food systems both sustainable as well as climate resilient, as we discussed. So here, now it is important to understand how is agriculture responsible for environmental degradation. So this kind of connect between how agriculture affects the environment, then how it affects the economy in turn is very, very important. So here, deforestation and biodiversity loss. Okay, so as we know, large areas of forest are cleared in order to accommodate the agriculture fields in order to meet the increasing demand of food production. Okay, so and also there is rapidly growing a global population which has actually increased from 2 billion to over 8 billion in less than a century. Okay, so in less than 100 years, the population has actually increased from 2 billion to 8 billion. Thereby, the demand is actually very, very high. And this expansion not only reduces the biodiversity by destroying the habitats, but also disrupts the ecosystem in many ways. The second way in which agriculture is responsible for environmental degradation is that green revolution and its impact. So the green revolution, when it actually was implemented, it introduced high yielding varieties of crops along with the chemical fertilizers. So it was like a blessing in disguise. Okay, so it helped in increasing the production. At the same time, it was actually complemented by the use of chemical fertilizers as well as pesticides in order to boost the food production. So although this particular revolution dramatically increased the food availability that actually prevented widespread famine, it also actually led to a lot of environmental costs as well as impacts such as increased chemical runoff, the degradation of soil as well as the soil health, as well as reduced genetic diversity in crops. So the best example here is in 1960 in Punjab, only 4.8% of the cropped area was under rice. Whereas if you compare that scenario with today, it is more than 40%. This actually displaced crops like maize, millets, pulses, as well as many other oil seeds. Okay. So here, there are two things. One is commercialization of agriculture is happening, and also monoculture is actually happening. So diversification of agriculture is actually not there. The next one, it has led to soil degradation. That is, intense agriculture practices, particularly the excessive use of pesticides as well as chemical fertilizers, have degraded the quality of the soil. And over 60% of Indian soils have a soil organic carbon content which is actually less than 0.5%, which is well below the optimum level, where the optimum level is supposed to be 1.5 to 2% recommended by the agriculture experts. Next, this degradation actually reduces the fertility of the soil, thereby reducing the retention capacity of the soil to hold water, thereby it compromises the agriculture productivity over. The next point is water depletion as well as contamination. Here, policies that actually promote the free use or the free electricity for irrigation have encouraged excessive, irrigation, and that actually has to, led to the depletion of groundwater because there was excessive groundwater extraction, particularly in states like the northern, that green revolution belt of Punjab, Haryana, as well as Rajasthan, that eventually led to severe decline in the water tables, thereby leading to scarcity of water. And also, additionally, runoff from the fertilizers as well as pesticides contaminate the water bodies that eventually affected the aquatic life and human health, and you would have heard about eutrophication and BOD, etc. Moving forward, the next one is the emission of GHG, that is the greenhouse gases. The cultivation of the crops such as rice in non-traditional areas has actually led to a significant emission of greenhouse gases. How? If you see that the paddy fields in certain regions emit nearly 5 tons of carbon per hectare, and this has contributed to a global climate change which further impacts the agricultural stability as well as the productivity through more frequent as well as severe weather events like El Nino, erratic monsoons, La Nina, etc. And the agriculture sector in India contributes 14% of the country's total greenhouse gas emissions, which is of course a very concerning data. Now let us see what does the article actually suggest in terms of sustainable and climate resilient agricultural strategies. The first one is the agroecology and the diverse cropping systems, that rather than focusing one particular type of crop, okay, that is specifically the rice. Here, implement the agroecological policies. Here, crop rotation has to be done and diversification of the plant species have to be done, as we discussed. Next one is focus on precision agriculture. This is nothing but you need to use the GPS, you need to use IoT, that is Internet of Things sensors, as well as drones for monitoring, as well as efficient resource application, whether it's pesticides or seeds, etc. Next one is improving the soil management. Here, you need to involve practices like no-till farming, then you have to use cover cropping as well as use organic compost. And then you have water management innovations like efficient irrigation system as well as the rainwater harvesting in order to reduce the wastage of water. Next one, climate resilient crop varieties. Here is that we need to develop crop varieties which are resistant to pest diseases as well as extreme weather. And also there has to be integrated pest management where we need to employ the biological pest control as well as the rotation of crop, that is crop rotation. Then the final point is renewable energy use in agriculture, which is nothing but incorporate solar or wind power for farm machinery. So whichever machinery we actually use for farm, we need to use renewable sources of energy, which essentially comes from wind as well as the solar energy. So these are the suggested sustainable and climate resilient agricultural strategies that have been proposed. The next article that we'll be discussing about is the NHRC accreditation status faces review in Geneva this week. So this particular article discusses about the NHRC, that is the National Human Rights Commission of India, trying to defend its human rights processes at a UN meeting in Geneva, where its A rating status will be reviewed based on the concerns that have been raised over specifically its composition as well as the function. So here we'll be discussing about the NHRC, its constitution, whether it's a statutory body or not, and we'll also be dealing with an organization of GANHRI, which stands for a Global Alliance on National Human Rights Institutions. Okay. So moving ahead, we'll be discussing about what is this Human Rights Commission, both national as well as the international commission, that is the GANHRI. And also, this particular topic can be mapped to GS Paper 2 mains, important international institutions, agencies and fora, their structure as well as the mandate. So moving forward, there has been a previous year question in the mains examination with respect to that of the efficient functioning of the National Human Rights Commission. So any kind of an organization, whether it is a statutory, constitutional or a quasi-judicial body, becomes very, very important specifically for your prelims examination. So now let us actually understand what this particular article is talking about. So here, the Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institution, that is the GANHRI, is actually scheduled to review the National Human Rights Commission of India in order to determine if it will maintain its A rating or will be downgraded to a B rating. So currently NHRC actually holds an A rating as per the GANHRI. Okay, that is a Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institution. So now it is actually waiting to review whether the A rating will be downgraded to B or not. And let us actually look at the significance of this particular accreditation. Okay. So first, let us understand what is this Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institution. It is nothing but one of the largest human rights network worldwide, representing more than 110 national human rights institutions, their members and staffs across all the regions. This is recognized and it is a trusted partner of the United Nations, that is the UN. So this actually unites, promotes and strengthens all the national human rights institutions in order to operate in line with that of the Paris Principles, that we'll actually see what it is, and also provides leadership in the promotion and protection of human rights. So moving forward, let us actually see what this particular Paris Principles for the National Human Rights Institution actually is. So the broad mandate of the Paris Principle is that it actually promotes and protects all the human rights, and also it is actually involved in advising, reporting and monitoring, handling complaints, human rights education as well as other responsibilities. It has a good degree of independence and it focuses on pluralism, that is, it reflects the diverse social forces of civil society And if you look at, it has the adequate powers, that is, it can initiate and inquire, as well as investigate and gather evidence and documents, consult with the non-governmental organizations as well as the other state institutions, and finally publicize the reports and findings as well as recommendations on how to enhance the efficient functioning of the national human rights institutions across the globe. And also, next one, it actually focuses on cooperative work, that is, it collaborates with the state institutions, the NGOs, as well as the civil society organizations. And finally, it is involved in the international engagement as well, where it contributes to international and regional human rights bodies as well as mechanisms. Now, let us understand what is the ranking procedure or the process that is actually taken up by this particular organization of GANHRI. So, the primary objective of accreditation is to ensure the independence, pluralism, as well as accountability of the national human rights institutions. And also, this particular body, through the subcommittee on accreditation, which is called as the SCA, is responsible for reviewing and accrediting NHRIs in compliance with that of the Paris Principles that we actually saw what were the Paris Principles. And it is a rigorous peer-based process undertaken by the representatives of the NHRIs from each of the 4 regions. So each of the 4 regions actually have their representatives, and they actually belong to Africa, Americas, Asia Pacific, as well as Europe. And here, a national human rights institution is reviewed by this particular subcommittee on accreditation only when it applies for initial accreditation, it applies for a re-accreditation every 5 years, and then the circumstances of the NHRI change in any way that may affect its compliance with that of the Paris Principles. Now, let us actually look at the accreditation status, okay? So, NHRIs that are assessed as complying with the Paris Principles. So, whatever national human rights institutions comply with that of the Paris Principles and its mandate, they are accredited with the status of A, and those that partially comply are accredited with status B. And whereas if you look at the National Human Rights Commission of India, it is given the rating of A. So now let us understand what is the observation of this global alliance about the functioning of the NHRC, that is the National Human Rights Commission of India. So the NHRC's ratings have been put on hold in 2023 over the concerns that were raised specifically with respect to that of the composition, the procedure, and the government interference, the presence of police personnel in the human rights investigation, and the lack of gender and minority representation. And moving forward, this particular alliance actually argues that NHRC has been lacking diversity as well as pluralism, noting an underrepresentation of women as well as a minority religions in the composition of the statutory body or the organization. And the decision over whether NHRC is given an A rating or if it is given a B rating would affect its ability to vote at UN Human Rights Council as well as other UNGA, that is United Nations General Assembly bodies. Now let us understand what is the defense of the National Human Rights Commission of India, that is how it has actually retaliated or defended itself. So the NHRC of India claims that having the government officials as a part of its composition or the structure actually enhances the efficient and the effectiveness with which it can actually function. And government asserts that the NHRC is an independent body and the selection process is not only rational but also it is transparent. Now, a very important prelims fact is that we need to know about this particular National Human Rights Commission, about its establishment, its objectives, the functioning as well as the implementations. Okay. So here, if you look, the overview is that it is a statutory body, that is the National Human Rights Commission, the statutory body established in the year 1993 under the Protection of Human Rights Act. Here the composition is, the chairperson is the former Chief Justice of India or a Supreme Court judge. It has 5 full-time members as well as the 7 deemed members over here in the structure. And if you look at the appointment and the tenure, they are appointed by the President based on the recommendation from a 6-member committee, and the members of the committee include the Prime Minister, the Speaker of the Lok Sabha, etc. And if you see the terms, it is actually a term of 3 years or until the age of 70, whichever is earlier. And if you see the role and function of this National Human Rights Commission, it actually has the powers of a civil court with respect to that of the judicial proceedings, and it is empowered to use the services of the government officers for, investigating any kind of violations which is actually related to that of the human rights, investigates also the matters within 1 year of occurrence. It actually functions are primarily recommendatory in nature and not binding totally. And it conforms to the Paris Principles, which has been endorsed by the UN General Assembly in the year 1993. The next article that we'll be discussing about is towards green growth. So this particular article suggests that the Reserve Bank of India must actually draw inspiration from the Central Bank of the European Union in order to establish a green taxonomy framework in order to assess the sustainability credentials of the economic activities. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing about what is this particular green taxonomy framework, and also it is essential to understand the concept of green growth as well as terms like greenwashing that might appear in your prelims examination. And also this particular topic can be mapped to the main syllabus of your UPSC GS paper 3, economic growth and development, environmental pollution and degradation from environmental perspective. Moving on, there has been a previous year question in the year 2018 with respect to broad-based trade and investment agreement, that is the BTIA. So such kind of agreements are very, very important for the examination. So moving forward, let us actually understand what this particular article is actually discussing about. So the article suggests that the Reserve Bank of India should develop a green taxonomy framework taking inspiration from the Central Bank of the European Union as well as ASEAN, that is the Association for Southeast Asian Nations. So moving forward, it is actually important to understand what is this concept of green taxonomy. So let us actually go ahead to understand what this particular term is all about. So a green taxonomy is nothing but it is a classification system that defines what are all the economic activities or the assets are actually green, that is which are all the activities or the assets in an economy which are environmentally sustainable. So this is the meaning of a green taxonomy. And moving forward, these taxonomies actually aim to increase the investment in the green activities as well as the assets and facilitate the greenwashing detection. So what do you mean by this process of greenwashing? Greenwashing is nothing but the act of a company or an institution actually providing the public or any kind of investors with misleading information about the environmental impact of that particular company's products as well as operations. So this is the meaning of greenwashing detection. So the taxonomies, that is in case if there is a green taxonomy, it actually aims to increase your economic investments in green activities or the assets as well as facilitate the detection of greenwashing. Okay. And moving forward, the companies, regulators as well as the financial market actors who might be the investors, the lenders or the insurers use these particular taxonomies in order to make informed decisions on the sustainable economic activities which can actually help India achieve the net zero decarbonization goals, which is actually aimed at to be met around 2070. So now let us actually understand why is there a need or how it is essential to actually have a green taxonomy. The first thing is as it actually helps you in taking informed decision making. The second one is it helps you to align the financial targets or the markets with the net zero goals. Next one, it helps you to cultivate an environmentally sustainable economy as a whole. And finally, this helps in reorienting the capital towards environmental sustainable economic activities. Okay. So moving forward, let us actually understand what is the need for a green taxonomy for India in particular. The first one is it is required in order to mobilize the finances for the Indian climate goals. Okay. So it is actually estimated that India requires a sum of around $17 trillion in order to achieve its net zero emissions target by the year 2070, according to the Reserve Bank of India. So, in that case, a green taxonomy can help to channel the investments towards sustainable economic activities or environmentally friendly or the green activities supporting India's transition to a low carbon as well as a climate resilient economy. For example, if you see, the EU Green Taxonomy Framework has already influenced over 1 trillion euro in sustainable investments since its inception or the beginning. The second need is that it is useful for addressing the climate risk to financial stability. Okay. So, the RBI's monetary policy report has actually highlighted that the potential impact of climate change on the economic output and financial stability, This will actually lower by around 9% in case there is an absence of climate mitigation policies. And also, a green taxonomy in place can help the financial institutions and the regulators in order to assess as well as manage the climate-related risk, ensuring the resilience of the financial system. Moving ahead, the third need for a green taxonomy framework is it enables transparency and accountability. Okay, so the lack of a common standard for sustainable economic activities has led to the greenwashing concerns. We've already discussed about what is this particular greenwashing. Okay, that is the company outrightly gives you false information or misleading information about the environmental sustainability or the suitability of the company's product or activities. The next one, a green taxonomy, in that case, if it is present, will provide a consistent framework for the reporting and the disclosures, enabling investors, the regulators, the decision makers, and all the associated stakeholders in order to make informed decisions about their investment. The next article that we'll be discussing about is Village Defence Guard killed in shootout with the militants in Jammu and Kashmir's Udhampur police. So this particular article discusses about an unfortunate killing of a village defence guard in confrontation with that of the militants in the Udhampur district of Jammu and Kashmir, as the title suggests. So in this particular article, we'll be discussing with who are these village defence guards and what are the village defence committees, the composition as well as the structure. And moving on, we can map this particular article or the topic to the current events of national and international importance for the preliminary examination, and for the mains examination, we can map it to GS paper 3, various security forces and agencies along with the mandate. So moving on to the previous year question, there has been a question that had been asked in 2023 in the preliminary examination with reference to that of the Home Guard. So from this, we can actually understand any kind of security forces, their mandate, the structure and the composition are actually very, very important specifically for your prelims examination. So moving forward, so now let us understand what this particular article is discussing about. So as we already discussed, a village defence guard member was killed in a confrontation with the militants in Jammu and Kashmir's Udhampur district. And now let us actually understand what are the village defence committees. Moving forward, we'll actually look into the composition and structure of the office and the objective functioning of who are the village defence guards. Okay. So here, the Village Defence Committee were first established in the year or in the mid-1990s in the Chenab Valley area of Jammu and Kashmir, India. And what was the purpose behind their establishment was that it was created as a civilian militia in order to provide self-defense for the local communities against any kind of militant threats as well as the terrorist attacks. So moving forward, if we actually look at the organizational structure of these particular committees, each VDC, that is a Village Defence Committee, each of the committee consisted of a special police officer, that is the SPO, who was the leader, and around 10 to 15 volunteer members who were mostly ex-service personnel, and they were equipped with .303 rifles. These are the kind of arm and ammunition where you need to manually actually load your bullet. And the SPO over here was actually salaried, where the other 10 to 15 members who were essentially ex-service personnel were volunteers. So moving forward, let us actually understand about the village defence guards. Okay. So there was a policy revamp that actually took place in the year 2020. So in 2020, the VDCs were restructured into village defence guards, introducing a revamped organizational structure where here all the members who are actually a part of this particular village defence guard will be paid. Unlike the VDCs, where only the special police officer was actually salaried. So the supervision here is that the VDGs, that is the Village Defence Guards, operate under the supervision of the District SP, that is the Superintendent of Police, and the SSPs, that is the Senior Superintendent of Police. And recent developments, if we see, following the Rajouri killings, which was actually very fatal. So VDGs were upgraded from .303 rifles, which were actually, you need to manually load the bullets over there. So that was actually upgraded to self-loading rifles recently. And if you see the training, the CRPF, that is the Central Reserve Police Force, is responsible for the training of VDGs in handling the automatic weapons. Now let us solve few prelims as well as the mains practice questions. The first question reads, Village Defence Committees often seen in news are primarily formed to. It is to provide arms and training to civilians to defend against the militant attack. So going by this particular option, the answer will be option B. Moving on to the second question, green taxonomy is primarily used to, first, it is to identify and classify investments based on environmental sustainability. So here too, the answer will be option B. Moving on to the third question, which of the following countries does not share a border with Iran, Saudi Arabia, Azerbaijan, Turkmenistan and Armenia? So these options, only Saudi Arabia does not share a border. So going by these options, the answer will be option A. Going to the fourth question, with reference to that of the Global Alliance of National Human Rights Institutions, consider the following statements. India is a full member of this particular organization. No, this is wrong. It is one of the specialized agencies of the United Nations. This is also wrong. So, institutions accredited by the Subcommittee for Accreditation of the NHRC with status B means full compliance with the Paris Principles. This is also wrong. So, since all the three statements are wrong, the answer will be option D. So moving on to the fifth question, with reference to that of the composition of the National Human Rights Commission, consider the following statements. The chairperson of the NHRC must be a retired Chief Justice of India. No, this is wrong. And the commission consists of a chairperson, 5 full-time members and 7 deemed members. This is actually right. So going by these options, since only statement 2 is correct, here the answer will be option B. Now let us solve the mains practice question, which reads, examine the various ways in which agriculture contributes to the environmental degradation and also discuss remedial measures that could promote sustainable and climate resilient agricultural practices in India. So this is a 10 marker and you need to write an answer for 150 words. Here the approach to this particular question has been broken down to the introduction body as well as the conclusion. So in introduction, we will briefly state how agricultural practices are impacting the environment, particularly if you see the health of the soil and the loss of biodiversity, water depletion, etc., highlighting the urgent need for the sustainable solutions as well as reforming these practices as well as policies. Towards the body, we'll discuss about contribution to the environmental degradation such as deforestation, green revolution impacts, overuse of water, etc. And also we'll discuss about the remedial measures such as adoption of organic farming, integrated pest management, micro-irrigation, then precision agriculture, etc., as well as agroecological approaches. And in the conclusion, we will emphasize the necessity of integrating the sustainable practices into agriculture in order to mitigate the environmental impact that is actually posed by it on the environment and also ensure long-term agricultural productivity and ecological stability. With this, we've come to the end of discussion of our daily news analysis. For regular updates, please do like, share and subscribe to Narayana IAS YouTube channel. Thank you.